And we're just delighted to have you all here. Feel free, if you choose, to type in where you're joining us from today. I'm joining you from Ontario, just outside Toronto. And Victoria, are you in cold, snowy Calgary today? Or
I am in Calgary, but it's +6, so I wouldn't say cold. We haven't had snow for at least 24 hours.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And I see we've got BC in the room as well. Vancouver, I just moved from there. So, and Alberta, wonderful. Well, we're really delighted that you could all join us today to talk about crowdfunding for authors. And if you've written a book, feel free to type the title in the chat room or the chat. And if you are thinking of writing a book, it's not quite ready to be out there in the world yet, feel free to share what you're working on. The topic today, crowdfunding for authors, works whether you are getting ready to be an author and publish your book, whether you have a published book, or whether you have several published books that have become furniture in your house by putting covers and tablecloths over boxes. So what we want to do, hopefully that's not any of us, but those of us who have multiple books know how quickly they can accumulate if we're not marketing and selling them. And crowdfunding is such a powerful way to help bring all of your book-related projects to life. Victoria, did you want to say anything before we dive in and start with intros?
No, I'm just enjoying seeing everyone signing in and saying where they're from and their experience, both, you know, if they've released books and, you know, and also really, I'd love to know what you'd like to get out of today's session, because that will really help us sort of tailor and make sure, you know, that we cover everything that you want to get out of it today, because we appreciate your time.
Perfect. So you're welcome to put that in the chat box. And I would suggest, because Victoria and I have done these workshops several times on crowdfunding for authors, we know that there's lots of questions that will pop up as Victoria and I are going through some of the content. So feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and then we'll come back to those. We've set time aside today to be able to handle your questions, and if there's things that you need to bounce off us. So we are completely ready to dive in and answer your questions as well today. So Victoria, I think we're going to introduce each other. Is that how we always have fun doing this?
Yes. Well, it seems much easier for me to introduce you. I don't know. I just, you know, talking about myself, that's awkward. So I'm going to introduce Charmaine Hammond. She's a 11 times best-selling author, 5 of her own books, and featured in 11 others, and 2 more ready for release. She is a certified professional speaker and expert in collaboration, funding dreams and bringing projects to life. Her company, Raise a Dream, has helped many clients implement her strategies to make their book a business. Over the years, she has raised millions of dollars for projects she has been involved with, for charities that she supports, for her own projects, and in collaboration with her clients. She has sold thousands of books through collaborative campaigns, sponsorships, and bulk buys. Welcome, Charmaine.
Thank you. My favorite way to sell books, by the way, bulk buys. Okay, well, I'm excited to introduce you, Victoria. I've had the pleasure of working with you, I think, over the last 5 years now on a variety of different projects, some crowdfunding related, some author related, some movie related projects, and other business adventures that we've had together. So Victoria hails from the UK, and she's lived in Canada now for about 18 years. One of the things that surprised me as I started to get to know Victoria in the early days is that she's an incredible marketer. She comes to the entrepreneur world with a long-standing background in marketing, and she is a crowdfunding expert. She has done this numerous times for her clients and her clients' projects. And so one of the things that's always interesting for me, Victoria, about your bio when I look at marketing and crowdfunding, and there's something about studying biochemistry at university.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use my biochemistry most days, but the data analysis skills are very useful.
And data analysis is a big part of crowdfunding, which you're going to hear about later from Victoria. She's worked for many, many big brands, and some of these will be familiar to you: Tide, Pampers, and Max TD, before she set up her own consulting business, which was about 9 years ago now, and they provide strategic marketing support, coaching, running crowdfunding campaigns, helping clients set up their own crowdfunding campaigns. And I think, Victoria, last time we talked, you've been involved in more than 100 campaigns now and have raised over, wait for this, everyone, over $20 million through the campaigns that you have helped others lead. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
That's pretty impressive. I should lead with that next time with your bio. And so, as I said,
blush.
So you were in really good hands as we talk about crowdfunding. And this is a great opportunity to talk about crowdfunding, because now is a time for us all to be innovative with our books. A lot of books being published right now. And so one of the things that we have to look at is, how does our book stand out? How do we bring it to life properly? I think everyone would be really interested in knowing how you got into crowdfunding, because part of what you talk about, Victoria, is the importance of being able to tell your story. That's a big part of crowdfunding. So I'm going to put you on the spot now to tell us yours.
Oh, no worries at all. So it was about 10 years ago. My son was in the Calgary Boys Choir and I was on the board, and I was asked to run a crowdfund for their 40th birthday concerts. And I'm like, I have no idea what a crowdfund is. So did a bit of research and discovered what it was and ran my first crowdfunding campaign, which was a success. And we raised enough funds to make all the concerts in their 40th anniversary year to be free, and open up access to the whole Calgary community. And, I think firstly, it just blew my mind, being able to activate your community. And I just thought that was a fantastic thing to do, and to do such a positive thing. But also, I found it sort of spiraled into looking at all types of crowdfunding. And I just realized what an opportunity it is. If you have, and I mean, some of you are business owners and you're looking at this as part of building your business. And, if you want people to invest in your business, typically the people who invest they have to be incredibly wealthy. And if you don't know incredibly wealthy people, how do you get people to sort of come in and back your business? Mm-hmm. And I just love the democracy of and democratization of capital that crowdfunding brings. So it allows people who've got a great idea to have access to capital. It allows people who don't have lots of money but want to dip their toe in to participate. And I just absolutely love that. And just looking, we have a real mix of people on the call, which is fantastic. But one thing I will say is often access to capital, it's easier if you're white, it's easier if you're male. And one of the things about crowdfunding is it levels the playing field. And so we find, it's a very good way for women to raise funds. It's a very, very good way for people of color to raise funds. So that's one of the other things I like, is it's down to having a great idea and the ability to implement.
Wonderful. And it works for authors.
Yes. And well, I mean, I think, the question for me, and I know when we started talking about this, the question I had was really, why is it important to properly fund a book?
That's a great question. And let's start with some stats. And some of you have probably heard these stats, that the average book that comes out sells about 250 copies. So some of you are probably picking your chin up off the table right now, because 250 book sales is not enough to cover all of the sweat equity that you've put into writing your book, to cover the costs of things like graphic design and editing and layout. And if your book is out there in the world, marketing and PR and events and tours, all of the things that you might be doing to market and sell your book. So my mission, since my first book came out in 2010, I had the pleasure of working with an amazing publisher who, before she signed her contract with me, basically made me promise that I would learn as much as I could about the publishing world and as much as I could about book marketing, because the majority of books, even if you're traditionally published, the real book sales happen from the author. And we want to blow that statistic, 250 books, right out of the water. So maybe add a zero to that, 2,500 or 25,000 or more. So that is the goal. And this is where crowdfunding just gets me really excited as an author. as an owner of a company that works with authors and speakers and coaches, because not only are you generating revenue, you're generating a crowd, you are building a crowd. And this is so important for authors because if we have a smaller community, which many of us do when we're starting out in the writing world, it's our first book, maybe we're not that active on social media, we have a small database. If that is the case, if we just keep marketing to that same group of people, our friends, our family, our colleagues, they get tired of it. And there's only so many books that they can buy. So, so I remember doing a book signing in the early days. I don't know if I shared this with you, Victoria. So my family had all bought books and, several copies of them. And then there was my very first book signing at a chapter store, and they all showed up and they bought books again. And I'm starting to count in my head how many copies my aunts and my parents must have by now, but it was great. So we need to build the crowd beyond the people who are going to support you because they care about you already. Regardless of how you publish, whether you self-publish, whether you're published by a traditional publisher, whether you work with a hybrid publisher, whether you have collaborative books, however you are published, it takes money to do that. And that's where crowdfunding can really help. And I think my favorite part, though, besides the revenue, Victoria, is just that community, because authors are spending a lot of money out of their own pocket. And the crowdfunding can help them build that community so they sell more books. What else do I want to say on this? I want to go back to bulk buys because you mentioned that earlier. Crowdfunding is also a way for authors to sell books in bulk and pre-sales of books in bulk, which is really exciting. And crowdfunding also offers an opportunity for authors to bring in sponsors into a crowdfund campaign. Victoria and I teach this in some of our bigger programs, but essentially what I mean by that is if you were doing a crowdfund, you could actually bring sponsors in to give gifts or products or services that amplify the number of people that support your campaign on a specific day. And not to worry, we're going to get into what does that look like? What does a campaign look like? What does it mean? So regardless of the amount of money that authors want to generate through crowdfunding, it offers so many opportunities for all stages of the book: writing the book and getting it done, getting it edited, getting it formatted, getting it in the format if you're going to sell it in other places other than just online. And of course, marketing, doing book tours, doing launches, and whatever other goals that you have, including authors who want to do things like wraparound products, a journal, or a workbook. So that's why I think it's important to properly fund your book, Victoria. Passionate on that one.
And that's the thing. I mean, you have the experience, that's the thing. When we started working together, I come from a crowdfunding world, not from a book publishing world. So it's great to have Charmaine who can actually come from your world and bring it all to life. But I think, everybody here is an author, so about writing books. I think from my side, I just want to make sure that we level the playing field about, what is crowdfunding. Yeah. So, it's the raising of funds. If I say that properly, it's the raising of funds, not funds, from lots of small amounts from your crowd. And people think of it being very new. Sort of, they think, oh, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. I heard about that sort of 5-10 years ago. But it isn't new. If you think of someone like Mozart, he was crowdfunded because he had a crowd of people who all put small amounts of money in to fund his music. In fact, the plinth of the Statue of Liberty was crowdfunded by a local New York newspaper. Many people got together and donated. They advertised it in the local newspaper. If you donated $1, you got a 6-inch statue of Liberty, and if you donated $5, you got a 12-inch replica of the Statue of Liberty. So yes, I know people are asking about perks. Perks have been around for a long time. But, nowadays, if you think sort of modern crowdfunding, as we call it, the first one was actually Marillion, the band. I'm showing my age by mentioning that. I apologize if you don't know the band, but they crowdfunded their album and tour back in the 80s, I think it was. So that's sort of modern day crowdfunding. And
Wow.
really the difference is you've got online platforms, they facilitate the process. You've got social media, emails, and newsletters to promote the campaign. So, you know, the concept hasn't changed, but there's certainly the tools that are there to help you have done.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a couple of platforms that probably a lot of us on the call have heard of, or we've even seen these platforms come before us through other authors that are doing crowdfunds. We hear of Kickstarter and Indiegogo that you mentioned, but there's a lot more than that. So can you dive a little deeper into the different types of platforms? Because I know there are different platforms that do different things.
Yeah, so Kickstarter and Indiegogo are what we call rewards crowdfunding platforms. So people back the campaign, and in return, they expect a reward. For example, the first access of a new book, or an invite to the book launch, or the book and a follow-up session with the author. So if you've got, you know, if you run a consulting business and you're actually using this as a bit of a lead magnet, then you might want to also bundle this all up with a session with yourself. So yes, I mean that's the Kickstarter and Indiegogo. It's a bit of a duopoly, but there are certainly some new players that are coming in, and especially with some really good tools that will be helpful for authors. So you know, I'm happy to dive into that at a later stage if people are interested.
Yeah, one of the things I've heard you say a lot, Victoria, in our conversations and in the work that you do on crowdfunds is you talk a lot about one of the mistakes that people make, which is choosing the wrong platform. They see what other people do and they choose that platform. Can you tell us a little bit more about the whole process of why it's important to choose the right platform, and what we need to know about having the right objectives to match it up with the right platform?
Do you mean like GoFundMe, for example?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, that's not the best campaign to use or platform to use for a book. That's not the best one for a book.
No, I mean, and the thing is, you go with what you're familiar with, and I completely get it. But it is really important to select the right type of crowdfunding. When there are different types, you've got donations, you've got rewards that I just mentioned, right the way up to investment crowdfunding. I mean, if you have a business that is, you know, you're looking for, you know, 100,000, 250,000 to grow it, probably the best place for you to go is an investment crowdfund, highly regulated because you're usually giving securities, but those platforms are there, and you know, it's choosing the right type of crowdfund, is choosing the right platform, and also the right objectives, because you might say, okay, you know, I want to pre-sell, you know, 500 books, 1,000 books, but you might say, I actually want to build my community. You know, I want to actually build awareness for what I'm doing. You know, we have one person who's actually gone through our full training program, and she is a coach consultant to help with grief counseling for people who've lost their pets. So very, very targeted, very niche, and she's very effective. But it's one of those time sensitive things. You know, it's like, oh, I have a new puppy, I need this course. That's not really the case. You know, it's a very time sensitive, and it's also getting the word out there so that when somebody has a friend or a family member who loses a pet, that they know that she exists. They know that she has her books, her tools, you know, her one-on-one coaching. She has a full spectrum. And so that awareness is so important, so that will build her business. So your objectives are really, really key. Now, as I mentioned, you know, you've got the sort of, you know, investing in the business. I just wanted to sort of just cover that off because it looks like there's a number of business people on this call. So there are three real types of investment crowdfunding. We have peer-to-peer lending. We have royalties campaigns. So when you listen to Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, they will say things like, you know, I'll take a 5% royalty on this for the first $100,000. So, you know, sales. And so that's a royalties campaign. So you can become your own shark in that environment. Or even, as I say, equity or investment crowdfunding. So that's when people get equity in your business in return for their investment, and they believe in your business to grow and to seek a return. So as I mentioned, there's, because it's securities, it is highly regulated. It's also geographically limited, whereas some of those rewards campaigns, donations campaigns, they can be global. So, understanding your target audience and seeing where they want to go, that will help you select the right platform.
I think that's so important, the right platform. I know, Victoria, you often review people's campaigns, whether they're authors or other types of campaigns. And often you can sort of look at a campaign and know if it's going to succeed in the 30 or 45 days based on the campaign they gave. And we mentioned GoFundMe. That's a great platform for people who are doing things like funding personal types of endeavors. We see it a lot with health, but with authors, and business, it's not a platform that people would typically use for a book. So that's and Victoria, you went through some of the different types of platforms. I'd love to hear more on, as an author who's considering doing a crowdfund for their book and whatever activities they want to accomplish through the crowdfund, what should we be looking at? When you mentioned our objectives, how do we align our objectives with the right platform?
Yeah, I'm actually just going to sneak in a little comment. It's a personal thing. It's probably why I digged at GoFundMe. Yes, people do know GoFundMe, particularly in North America, but there are other better platforms out there. Charmaine, you and I we've talked about Fundraiser in the past. That's Fundrazr. The guy seems to not like using E's, so that's why. Their platforms have raised over $250 million, but I just find it's a bit easier to use, and the financial side of it is a bit better. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that if you are looking at donations, just to have a look at some of the other ones, and they also have Crowdfunder in their platform, which calculates the shipping costs separately. And trust me, if you're looking at going global or broadly, that's a huge benefit that some of the other platforms don't have. Anyway, sorry, I know that was a bit of a rabbit hole, but it's just, I just, see it quite frequently, and it's just good to see that there are other options out there.
Yes.
So let's answer your question. So thinking specifically about choosing platforms, the type of campaign, it really does come down to what is your objective. Are you trying to pre-sell books? Are you trying to raise the capital to fund the book, the development of the book? Are you so you can launch it professionally? Are you using the funds are you using the whole campaign to promote your book with your target audience? Are you looking to get your book sponsored to reach a specific audience? Or are you looking to build your business? And could be that writing is a revenue stream. It could be that the book is more of a lead magnet to build trust with your target audience, so that they then come in and actually buy your services. So work out those objectives, and then from there, actually the type of campaign usually screams quite easily, and then you just have to select which is the right platform for you. And so that really, you'll look at things like the cost to be on the platform. I believe there is one platform out there that's saying it's free at the moment. So that's good. But there are other platforms that offer a tipping model, where the tip goes to you as the business to offset your costs. I will say Indiegogo has just introduced a tipping model, and the tip goes to Indiegogo. Just wanted that little interesting one.
Not to the author. Okay.
No.
Good to know.
So yes, it looks like with the way it tips, it's a bit like when you tip a waitress, you assume the waitress gets the tips, not the owner of the business. But that's another matter. But yeah, so usually you can, when you're looking at those platforms, you're looking at the pricing, you're looking at the audiences. But one thing, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, is it's not a build it and they will come situation. So, don't just go for a massive big platform and assume people will stumble across you. You really have to do the heavy lifting to get people to the site. And the industry average is about 15%, 15% will come from the platform. So you've got to bring the other 85% in. So yeah, just wanted to raise that, but I'm sure you'll grill me on it. Charmaine.
So, you know, that what you're talking about though, Victoria, really connects to the next question that I think people will find very helpful, is that one of the other failure points that we see authors have related to crowdfunding, is that they leave no time for the planning. They, you know, I've had authors phone me a couple weeks after their crowdfund is up and they say, I launched it on the weekend. And, you know, and I said, oh, how much planning did you did? Oh, I just, you know, put it up on Friday. No planning, and there's no ability to engage your community. So you're actually working at a cross purpose when you do that. You really need to have a process, a structure, and a plan if you want to succeed. And Victoria, this is something that you work with and your authors. We do this in our programs, but tell us about the importance of process and then some of the details on the plan. And this is where you're all going to want to start taking notes here for sure.
And I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, crowdfunding is a very powerful tool when it's done correctly. You know, it's not quick, it's not free. I did have a guy come to me once and say, I want to raise $1 million by tomorrow. And I'm just like, yeah, no.
Probably not possible.
But I mean, if you invest the time and a bit of money, you will see the rewards. So, you know, we like to spend 90 days preparing a campaign, really getting the crowd warmed up so that when your campaign launches, people are in there straight away backing the campaign. There's an organization called the Crowdfunding Center. And they assess every single crowdfunding campaign that takes place globally. And their data shows if you hit 11% of your target on day one and 33% in the first 7 days, you should hit your goal. So you've got to get that audience ready and raring to go. You know, is it lemmings? I don't know, but success breeds success. I think that's a positive way of saying it. The challenge is if you don't have that traction, people are looking at it going, well, nobody else likes this book. You know, why should I back it? You know, so you want that sort of success, and that will really support everything you're doing. Now, you know, I'm curious to understand sort of the amount of money that authors need to raise for a book launch. Can I fire that one back at you, Charmaine?
Sure. And I've seen many different answers from authors that we've worked with, friends of mine that have done crowdfunds. I see a lot of authors looking to raise between $7,500 and $12,500. That's a very common amount, and it's usually for a very specific piece, like to complete the book, for the final editing and layout. I've seen authors, you do a crowdfund like that for the launch of their book. And what I'm really starting to see now, which gets me very excited, is authors thinking on a little bit of a bigger scale. And so not just looking at the one piece of the book, but what else could they crowdfund for? You talk about this, Victoria, as having that stretch goal. If you achieved all of your crowdfunding, what would be the next part that you would crowdfund for? For example, we've got the book done, the layout's done, it's published, it's out there. Now we're going to crowdfund for a tour, a virtual book tour. So it's all over the map, but I would say commonly $7,500 to $12,500. I'm seeing this increase now where authors are saying, I want to raise between 15 and 25 or 15 and 30,000 in crowdfund to really make the impact with my message.
Yeah, and it is, a lot of it is about gamification. It's not a standard sort of marketing campaign. So I often look to have, what's the bare minimum you need to be successful? So just building on your point there. So if it's say 5K and I can get the book published, but 7,500, I can then do color copies, or I can then do an additional book to go with it, a journal, etc. And by having that 5K, which is the minimum you need to do something meaningful, if you raise 4K, you're 80% of your goal. Woohoo! You know, success. Whereas if you put down that 12,500, now I shouldn't have done that because it's going to make my brain hurt, but it's just over a third of your goal, which is, you know, it's still pretty good, but you know, you've got that big gap to get to. So choosing those sort of that minimum target and that stretch target is really important. So if you're talking sort of like 7,500 to 12,500, I mean, that's perfect for a rewards crowdfunding campaign. And, you know, so we've talked about some of the platforms that are out there, and, you know, even with some of the free or low cost platforms, there are still charges that you can't avoid. Things like PayPal still charge their fees. But just to be aware, and that's one of the things, is actually getting that budget. So if you look at that 7,500, 12,500, you can also add into there the cost of raising capital. So, you know, if you've got some costs in there, people expect you to have those, you know, they don't expect you to do this for nothing. So they will definitely expect those costs to be in there. But you will still need to spend some money to build your crowd. And so, you know, you do have to be sort of brutally honest about who will benefit from your book. Really dive into the people who will find it most valuable, as these are the people who are most likely to back your campaign. We've talked about, somebody said this recently about throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
I always think of spray and pray. You know, you do need a niche. And I know I've heard you say, Charmaine, the number of authors you've spoken to, everybody will want to read this book. Everyone will benefit from it. And, you know, to build your crowd that way is very costly and inefficient. So identifying your target audience and really going after that is key.
Yeah, I think that I just want to emphasize that, because that's one of the other mistakes we see when we look at different crowd funds, is that the marketing is so general that as the reader, I don't really know if that book is for me or not. So my publisher, when I signed with her in 2010, the one thing that she asked me in the very early stages of our conversation is, she said that, who is your audience? And initially I answered everyone. And I've never said that again, because she very quickly educated me that how costly it is, as Victoria said, and time consuming to market to everyone. Everyone isn't going to be your audience. And the more that you can be specific about who the audience is, the stronger your campaign will be, because the people who are your perfect audience also bring in, as they share your campaign on social media and support you and be a champion for you, they have connections who are also your perfect audience, your perfect reader. So that's how you really start to build that community. Victoria, I was wondering if there's a really great insight that you share about kind of how the funding comes, like who it comes from. You talk about the amount that comes from you know, people you know, people you don't. Can you talk about that? Because I think that's important too.
Absolutely. So typically a third of your backers come from people you know. And for those of you going, I don't know anybody, you know, there are ways to sort of find those people. And it's interesting sort of when you sort of work your way through that target audience and the people you know, these people come out of the woodwork most definitely. Then the next third comes from people that they know. So often we're looking for proof points. Now, if somebody may not be in your target audience, it was like I was saying about the lady with the, you know, helping with grief from the loss of a pet. You know, if somebody knows that there's a crowdfund campaign going on for this, they don't have pets, they're allergic to pets, they don't have any animals at all, but they know their next door neighbor, this has happened. That's that next third out. So it's giving that initial third the tools so that they can actually reach out and share it with their communities and their networks. And so that builds that next third. And then the final third is from all the other activity you do to reach your backers. So that could be PR, that could be newsletters, that could be social media advertising. So yes, so that's really sort of those third. And you need to let people know, know that the book is coming and why they would be interested. And as I say, give them the tools to share with their networks. So you will increase your community. And then you will also need to pitch to the media and other channels why they should back your campaign. And that's the key thing, is we focus on the why, how we want people to feel at the end of the book, what changes we want. When I look at a number of campaigns, the ones that tend to be less successful is it's really focuses on, I have a book, and it's all about, it's me, and my book's wonderful and you want to read it. You need to flip that round, and you need really, one of the keys to success is really telling the story. And you guys are storytellers, so you're great at this. So, talk about, what is the book about, why people should care. So, that's one of the big flips that I always think is important. But it's important where you tell the story and how you tell the story. People are all about what's in it for me. So you need to focus on the problem you are solving, or make a connection with the target backers. So for those people who are writing fiction, you want to make a connection. Oh, this is a book I really want to read. For those people who are writing nonfiction, you want to perhaps focus much more on the problem you're solving. And then share what we call a call to action. So now you've made them aware of your campaign, got them interested, so they want to support your book. Now you need to tell them about the campaign and why they should back it, and also how they can back it.
Brilliant. And so two things are really jumping out for me, Victoria, that really go hand in hand. Messaging, that being able to tell your story in a way that pulls people in. It's not kind of, here's my bio, it's actually the storytelling process. And then the second part is planning, making sure that you are following those 90 days, all of the activities that need to go onto it. So when we can think of messaging and planning hand in hand, that's going to help us create a very successful campaign. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not complicated. It's just a process you need to follow, and missing out steps reduces your chance of success. As I said before, success breeds success. So you're likely to be picked up by the platform's algorithm if you are successful, that 11%, or greater on that first day. That's going to pick up the algorithm is going to pick it up and promote it. And then you might get more than 50% from the platform. And even backers are more likely to back a campaign when they see real traction.
Actually, I just wanted to capture, for those authors that have done campaigns before to launch their book, or you've done kind of an Amazon campaign, full well the importance of all kinds of people on those days out there telling your story, sharing your post, getting that out to that audience, and building that momentum and cross-sharing and excitement and buzz. It's the same strategy really that we use when we're launching a book, the same thinking behind that launch as we put into our crowdfunding plan. And I've actually, just like you have, Victoria, seen a lot of crowdfunds that not only achieved their goal. So I'm going to share an example of an author friend who just did their campaign a few months ago. Her goal was 7,500 and she got 12,500. And another one who had, I think, 8,000 as the goal, and she brought in 10,500 and change for her crowdfund. And so we see people exceeding their targets, not only hitting it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, you always want to think, what's the bare minimum I need to be successful? But I think one of the things, and that's why I enjoy working with you, Charmaine, is you also stretch people to think beyond just the book. So it's not just, getting the book into people's hands and looking at it as a sort of an early, you get the first copy, although that's really exciting to do so. But what about doing with the additional funds, doing a bigger launch event, or adding color illustrations, or, what else can you add to that? And the other thing is that you can use crowdfunding as market research, because you're talking to your target audience. You've defined your target audience. You're talking to your target audience. You can now actually put some ideas out there. So you could have, and I know one of the questions is about the perks. So Lillian, I'm going to sort of answer your question a bit in here, because I think this ties in nicely. So we like to see anywhere from 3 to 7 perks in a campaign. The thing is, if you have too many perks, it just confuses people, and it's the analysis paralysis, and they don't do anything. And we like to have a range of perks from a sort of a low level, so an entry level, that could be the $10, $20, $25 range, right up to a stretch amount. I mean, we've had perks before, you know, up to about 5,000. You know, if you wanted to offer a course to a training course to an organization, you might want to do that. So you want to have sort of like a bit of a sort of a shape of perks. So what you might do is you might do, here's the book and here's a journal, and here's the book and here's a calendar. So 2 different ways of presenting the same sort of content. And what you might find is that the journal, you get 100 backers, and the calendar, you get 1 backer. Okay, we probably need to talk about how you do print on demand so you don't get screwed with printing all those things. Well, that's a separate conversation. But I mean, straight away, you can see that your target audience is looking for the journal. And so that helps you. So when you're launching, you know that the journal is the one that you're going to be targeting. So I think that's just something when you're looking at those extensions, those are sort of types of things that you can do, but also it's really good for some market research as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think about some authors are coaches or speakers, for example. So as a perk, I've seen lots of authors start at the low end. You know, you can have my book, perk number 1. Perk number 2 is what Victoria said, the journal and the book. And perk number 3 is maybe purchasing 50 books, sponsoring 50 books that are going to go to your favorite charity. Or in our case, for my children's books, one of the perks will be supporting 100 books so that we can have 3 classrooms receive the books as a gift. And in one of the perks of that they get is I will do a virtual training on any one of the corporate topics that I speak on in the corporate world. So you can get really creative and bring in, if you're a coach, one of the upper end perks could be your book. You get everything in the lower end perks, and maybe they get 4 coaching sessions with you. So be creative. And if you offer other products or services, then find a way to make them all mesh and come together. That's where I think crowdfunding not only builds a crowd, generates revenue, but it actually supports your business model as well.
Oh, completely agree. And I think, you know, I mean, to Lillian's point, you know, being creative with those perks, making sure there's a balance, but not too many, can really, really help your business. But it can be simple things like, I mean, firstly, people are getting early access. So you might want to do, say if your book is, I'm going to pick a number, $10, you might want to do a super early bird, and the first 10 copies on the site you might do for $5. Now make sure that your costings will still cover that. You don't want to make a loss on this, but you're going to get those first 10 books are going to be selling really quick. And then you can get a notice out saying, hey, the super early bird is gone. We now have the early bird, and the early bird is $8. So you then got 40 copies at $8. So you're going to get more people coming in and getting in there. And then you're going to go, oh, we've got the crowdfunding price, which is now $9. So people are still getting a bit of a deal. And of course, because you could argue selling directly, you're getting the revenue. So you're covering your costs most definitely. But you've got that sort of people think, wow, I'm going to get the first edition of this book. I'm going to get it early. And then do things like, what about signing? What about personalizing? Okay. I mean, none of us write very much, so it might be your wrist might be sore, but I mean, that would mean so much to people, and that's a massive differentiator. One of the other things I've heard you say, Charmaine, is making a phone call. So, you know, picking up the phone and just saying thank you to people, or social media posts. You know, if you've got something that you want to be aligned with, you could say, right, you know, I just want to say thank you to this organization who's backed my campaign, and they get the promotion. So there's a lot of things that you can do that are low or no cost. And that is one thing I would say with the perks, is make sure you fully cost them out. There's some really good organizations out there that can do print on demand. So you can manage your costs. You're not having to order 100 of a t-shirt and then having to sort out if you've got the right sizes or other. You can do the print on demand. But I will say t-shirts, death by t-shirt. Unless you have a really, really, really good reason for having a t-shirt, branding wise, I mean, I've got a dog running around my ankles now. So, but if you've got a really good reason for a t-shirt or a hat, if you've got like a hyper targeted audience, and it would be great to have everybody wearing your hat, go for it. But you've got to look at the cost. I mean, hats are better because they're usually one size. T-shirts, you have typically male t-shirts, female t-shirts, unisex. You have from XXS to 5XL. I mean, it just is a nightmare. And, people will say, oh, I'll do a t-shirt for $20. Well, it probably will cost you $20 when you fully load that, including picking and packing. And so what money are you actually making? What are you actually making towards your book? So just be really careful when you're sort of selecting those perks to make sure that you're actually making covering a cost, but B, making money, because it's of course funding everything else as well.
And we're going to go into questions in just one moment. I'm going to add one piece. I'm going back to what you talked about, knowing your audience. For example, the book that I'm writing that is for workplaces around conflict resolution, t-shirts would never fly as a perk for me. Probably journals wouldn't either. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't do for that audience of readers. What's probably going to be my best perk will be the book and me doing a virtual training program, me doing a consulting program for coaches. So you really have to, we see authors do this all the time. They pick the perks that they like, but they might not be the prime audience of their own book. So you're picking perks that you love, but that your audience may never access, which means if they're not interested, the corporate audience, as I use that as my example, that's not going to be a group of people who, for example, are going to have t-shirts. Be excited about that, which means that they've just passed on the perk. So make sure that your perks are aligned with the audience. Otherwise, people skip over the campaign. Now, I think we should go into some questions. I know there was a couple questions in the chat box, and we welcome you to ask your questions as well, folks.
I was actually just going to sneak at something in, because I know we've been talking a lot about nonfiction books, but if you have a fiction book, what about one of your perks being, 10, 15, 20 copies for a book club, and then you can virtually call in, so, set up so that you actually can participate in a book club. I mean, how amazing would that be? Which book club wouldn't want you to have a chance to actually meet the author and question the author, or get the author to participate in their book club? So, I think those are the things that, just really thinking around what's going to be best for you and for your campaign.
I saw a great one a while ago, Victoria. It was a book on parenting and parenting when you have more than one child to parent. So that was kind of the book. But the perks were so creative. I don't have children, and I wanted the perks. And so one of the perks was a parent rescue kit or something like that. It was a parent rescue kit, and it was really a self-care kit for parents. And when I was looking at their campaign page, it was one of the more expensive perks, and that was the highest. I think that at one point they ran out and they ordered more for that. So again, really think about what your audience wants. So let's dive into questions. What have we got here?
I was just going to say, Janet said that she narrated the audio for her book, and that's something that could be a natural extension. We talked about extensions, so that was a great one.
It's a great example.
And Janet's question was everything. I hope we've answered some of the everythings.
And
hi, Lillian. I can see
ahead.
You've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, Charmaine. Hey, Victoria. This is actually, I guess, the third time I've been paying attention to this, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm finally kind of getting around to the planning stage.
Great.
And one of the big things that I kind of got stuck on in regards to creating monetary values for the perks, and I took a look at some of Kickstarter campaigns for authors and stuff like that who are doing some similar things, because this is a nonfiction book on public relations that I'm writing. I am a PR coach, so I do coaching sessions, and I've done courses and workshops and stuff like that for clients. And in looking at pricing out monetary values for the perks, where I get stuck, like where you talk about making sure you cover your costs, is most of my current author network and a lot of the authors I work with on the PR side of things are US based. And being that I'm in Canada, and I've talked to other Canadian authors who have gone through the self-publishing, which is what I'm looking to do. They have talked about how difficult it is to go wide in this country, because Chapters does not like to play, Indigo does not like to play ball with things like Ingram, Spark, and everything else. So where I really get stuck is whenever I ask advice on like what sort of platform should I be doing, like incorporating to go wide and everything else, which will of course play into the monetary costs for crowdfunding, making sure that I'm getting out the perks, proving that I have a quote unquote pre-order audience, right? But where I get stuck is like, what do I do when it comes to, the different ways to publish? Because I've heard a lot of, I pay attention to the industry. Amazon is not treating indie authors the best way they could be right now. I personally don't have a ton of confidence in them, and I don't really want to use them. However, it can help you go wide. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, there's so many options. I feel like I have better knowledge of how to go wide in the US and international than I do here in Canada. So that's kind of where I'm stuck when it comes to pricing out funding goals and the monetary values for the perks and everything.
Yeah. One of the things that I was going to say as a strategy, the whole question about what's the best way to publish is, and who to best publish with, is probably a much bigger conversation. And I'm going to go through, I've got some resources, Lillian, I can get to you on the kind of the publishing options and what authors are looking at right now. Maybe what I'll do is I'll do a little handout and we'll get that to you, Victoria, so everyone gets the information. But one of the things that you have opportunity for, Lillian, is what we call special sales in books. And that's where I focus on. In fact, I don't do a lot of bookstores. My publisher doesn't work hard anymore to get them in bookstores, because there's too many times that the books are sitting on skids in the warehouse, and the publisher or you have paid to ship them there. They never make it to the shelf, and then you pay to ship them back. And so I tend to not work with bookstores and unless it's through a signing strategy. I love doing that because I sell my books 2 at a time. That's called my BOGO method, buy one, gift one. And I'll send you information on that as well. We go through this in some of the courses that we do with Victoria. But what you have opportunity for, and I think a lot of you on this call today have opportunity, it will just look different based on the type of book you wrote, is special sales. So for example, if your book is on PR and if it's a corporate audience, then I would be looking at associations like leadership associations, HR associations, and I would sell those books by the box and by the trunkload. And that's where I think you have a lot of opportunity. The large majority of my books that I've sold since 2010 have been in bulk sales. So having sponsors. One sponsor, for example, purchased $2,500 worth of my books to give out to organizations in their community who couldn't afford them. That's where it gets really juicy from a book sale perspective. And so with your audience, Lillian, I think you have potential even beyond the crowdfund to sell your books in bulk and to do things like webinars or online conversations about PR, or if you do crisis PR, do a session on crisis PR in your crowdfund. You might be doing things like, I'll offer you 3 consulting sessions around PR for your company. I'll help you develop a PR policy for your company. I'll do a training program for your employees so they understand public relations. That's where I think you've got some great opportunities, and lots of you here can take that exact example for Lillian and apply it to your book. It will just look different. Does that help, Lillian?
Charmaine, you and I have been connected on LinkedIn for years now.
Yeah, we have. I remember when I met you.
Yeah, we had a conversation ages ago now, and every time I honestly, every time we connect and you know, with each other, you always have these great tidbits for me, because here I am thinking about relying on, you know, the individual you know, purchaser, the individual funder, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, associations, that's right.
And employers. I sell boxes and boxes of my books in bulk when I speak. I sell them. I have a campaign every quarter where I reach out to employers and say, hey, it's Administrative Professionals Day coming up in April. Have you bought your gifts? What about my book? So we have strategies that we implement, and you can start to implement those and test them through a crowdfunding campaign. Janet. Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something, Victoria?
No, I was just going to say the one thing I would just include is always budget, look at the full costs and including your time to pick and pack.
Right.
As I say, shipping, one of the platforms we work with calculates it separately, because otherwise you're sort of like, oh, how much shipping do I have? And, you don't want to sort of scrimp on paper and go for cheap paper to make your book lighter for shipping, because then your book feels crappy. And, it's funny how that tactile side of it will actually impact the perception of value of your book. So, there's all these sort of things you have to sort of dig into. Yeah, Janet, please ask away.
Thanks. Victoria, I just want to comment on something you said, and that's about the quality of the paper. I was so fussy about the quality of my paper because I like the feel of it. It's my own thing. And so it's what we like ourselves, because it's the people that we write for are like us, right? We're really our target audience. But Charmaine, I did all this by the seat of my pants. I woke up with a title in my head, and 6 months later it was an ebook, and just flew with it. And I funded the whole thing myself. Thankfully, my friend is a publisher, a hybrid publisher, so she did the book, and Canadian. I sent you, Charmaine, her information.
Thank you.
But
great. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't do anything like that, and I'm kind of, Charmaine knows my background, but my background isn't business, and my background is more service. And so this has been a real challenge. I have sold books, and there's comments on it, but it's my audience is what I'm challenged with. It's really a mental health. It's called The Year the World Paused, because it was all about it. There's 21 authors, and they talk about how they started the year with COVID and how they came out the other end, how they transformed. And my intention with that was, my year was so totally different from what I was hearing. I found other authors with the same, because I knew people would be, there's so much negativity, and I wanted to show that there was. So marketing, I did no marketing, really. The book's out there. And then I decided I found a Canadian audio producer in Bragg Creek, and I went to her, and she directed me and that for the audiobook.
You would have driven past my house.
Oh, well. We were house sitting so that I could do it, because anyways, you and I'll talk more. But what about, it came out in audio, in paper in 2021. The audiobook came in 2022. What about promoting now? I haven't really done anything.
You can absolutely.
How does that work for a book that's out? Yeah. I think it could go well to businesses and stuff too. So maybe you and I, Charmaine, might have to have another conversation, because that is not my forte.
Yeah, there's a
You
lot
know,
of,
give me an
I'll give you the
emergency, I
short
can deal
answer.
with it.
I'll give you the short answer because we're almost at time here. The short answer is if you have a book that's already out there, you can still do a crowdfund for it. If you have a book that's in one version only, EPUB, you could do a print version. So you can, I have lots of authors we work with that are using crowdfunding now to relaunch their book through a virtual book tour. So for example, Janet, yours is related to mental health. So maybe you do something special in May during Mental Health Week. And for those of you that have collaborative books, and we'll go through this on our next call that's coming up, but collaborative books work really well with service clubs. I just sold another 50 of my collaborative books to one service club, the Seroptimus Club. So there's some very interesting, innovative strategies that you can apply, and we will go through that more on one of our upcoming calls. Did we want to talk? And so Janet, and I'll send you all information about how do we use crowdfunding for a book that already exists out there to kind of relaunch it and give it life. And I'll put those in the notes that Victoria will send, but it's a great question. And Victoria, did we want to talk about our next call that we're having to continue the dialogue around crowdfunding? We want you to do crowdfunds, everyone. we want you to bring your book to life or bring it back to life, whatever fits for you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with you, Miss Swift. You know, if you've only got it in paperback, you can do a Kickstarter for the hardcover. So beautiful. Absolutely. Yes. So, you know, if people are interested in a deeper dive, we will have a longer session. I think it's the 28th of February.
Yep.
And so after this session, we will send an email to everybody registered on this call. We will have a recording of this. So if you didn't write fast enough, I know I speak fast, you can listen to it again. But if you want to sign up, you know, for the next call on the 28th, the details will be in there. So, you know, if this has piqued your interest, then please feel free to sign up and we will see you again.
Perfect. And if you have questions that are coming up and you can't be there on the 28th, I would love it if you could email Victoria or myself, message us somehow and send us your questions so that we could answer that question on the 28th, and you'll hear the answer when you listen to the recording. So even if you can't be with us on the 28th, it's a no-fee workshop. Sign up just like you did for this one. Join us because we'll be diving deeper, kind of building on these fundamentals that you learned today and talking further about what does this look like for your crowdfund and how you could bring this to new levels of success. So as long as you're registered, you'll get the recording.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining us, and can't wait to continue the conversation. Yeah,
been great questions, discussion. And, you know, I think, Charmaine, you've really shown the importance of properly funding your book.
Yes. Yes. So, and we want you to have a book that's an evergreen book. Like my book is 2010, second edition, it's still selling. And that's what I love, is for authors to create a life around their book. And crowdfunding is a great way for you to do that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you everyone for spending your lunch times or afternoons or mornings, depending on where you are. And we hope to see a number of you on the 28th.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.